a primer about who you're imitating, because some people might not know. I don't know. Some will, some won't. I don't know. But
No
They
worries.
can talk about it. It could be a conversation starter.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Denise, are you in Florida right now? Or are you out and about?
I'm in Florida, so I'm moving. So there's junk behind me, but I'm like trying to stand.
Oh, there's no Jack. I don't. Yeah, you're fine. If that's Jack, I don't want to show you the
Well,
rest of my office.
I know it was like, oh my God. Yeah, anyway.
Oh man. And Gary, you're in Charleston right now?
Yes. Yeah, I'm in
Is that
Charleston,
your
South
home
Carolina.
office? At
Yeah.
home?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Fancy.
Thanks.
Like,
Thanks. Yeah, I taught this morning, but I told the students, I was like, I'm going home. I got things to do, kids. I
exactly.
can't. Yeah.
And we were mentioning that sometimes people dip in and out of the reading. I'll edit this out for the recording, but we get a lot of traffic to the recording actually.
Perfect.
Sometimes the live reading on Tuesday afternoon is a little hit or miss. But yeah, we'll put the recording up on our site like this afternoon. So
Perfect. Like it.
Okay.
awesome. Okay, well, I might as well get started, and then and that way we can get kind of done as close to the hour as possible, as people are slowly starting to attend. Okay, so I want to welcome everybody for coming to our 8th installment of the 10-part series for celebration of literary arts, sponsored by Des Moines Area Community College. Whether you're here live or looking at the recording afterwards, we appreciate you tuning in. Today, we're excited to have two amazing poets, one who has been here before, one who we're just meeting now, Denise Duhamel and Gary Jackson. And we'll be hearing from them in just a moment. But I want to first thank a couple people. We want to thank Des Moines Area Community College and the Department of Liberal Arts for helping us sponsor this event for now 19 years. And we also want to thank the Student Activities Council for giving us funding every single year to help put this on as well as faculty and students for tuning in so often. I also want to give you a quick rundown of what our event is going to be this afternoon. First, we'll do a quick introduction, and then we'll have a small conversation about their work. And then each poet will read for about 15 minutes or so, and we'll end with a traditional Q&A. So if you're here live and you have questions, please feel free to submit through the chat or through the Q&A Dropbox or my email address if you have. I've already gotten a couple of emails actually about questions they want asked. And yeah, feel free to participate anytime through the chat. Be happy to do so. But without any further ado, let's get things rolling with some introductions. First, we have Denise Duhamel, who is the author of 14 books of poetry and 3 chapbooks. Her most recent book of poetry are Second Story, published in 2021, and Scald, 2017. Her collection Blew Out from 2013 was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award, a recipient of fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. She is a distinguished professor at Florida International University in Miami. And she is joined by Gary Jackson, who was born and raised in Topeka, Kansas, and is the author of the poetry collections Origin Story. I should probably show you Origin Story. And Missing You Metropolis, published in by Grable Press in 2010, and which received the 2009 Cave Canem Poetry Prize. He's also the poetry editor of The Future of Black, Afrofuturism, Black Comics, and Superhero Poetry. The recipient of the Cave Canem and Breadlow Fellowships, he's also an associate professor in English and creative writing at the College of Charleston, where he's currently the director of undergrad creative writing and teaches in the MFA program. So thank you both for joining us for the hour and taking time out of your schedule. Maybe we can first begin with a poem for each of you, and to get the conversation started. Denise, would you like to go first maybe and read one of your poems for us?
Absolutely. I thought I would read this poem, Howl, which is an, I guess, invocation of Ginsberg for now. Howl. I saw the best minds of my generation, i.e. Fauci, Birx, undermined by Trump, doctors hungry for truth, dragging themselves through inane press conferences at 5, trying to fix the Prez's anger. Angels with hip replacements and fashionable scarves, holding up graphs, making predictions, scientific dynamos trying to break through, to give us light. Who, in spite of political tatters and hollow men, sat up zooming in the virtual darkness of cold, hard facts floating across cable news host desks, contemplating death rates. Who bared their brains to the World Health Organization and saw Monday night riots, angels staggering in Lafayette Square, flashbangs illuminating, who passed by unimaginative reporters with radiant, cool eyes, pleading with Americans not to drink bleach, tragedy among the non-scholars of pseudoscience, who were expelled from news conferences by a crazy and obscene know-nothing on the whims of a numbskull, who cowered in green rooms, undercut, retrieving their speeches from wastebaskets and listening to the terrible thump of Trump through the wall, who got their words twisted, regurgitated, returning to Joe Scarborough with a plan for keeping nursing home patients and prisoners safer, flattening the curve in New York, who urged the closing of hotels and theme parks, Paradise Church, shopping malls with their mannequins' torsos glowing night after night with dreams of capitalism, now a waking nightmare of alcohol wipes, cock and endless balls no longer welcome in gentlemen's clubs, strippers shuddering, clouds of debt, no spinning on poles, no dollars, Canadian or American, all the motionless world of highways with no cars. Peter Pans playing solitaire on their iPads, plots and more plots dug up in cemeteries, drunken, safer at home moms and dads banging pans from windows and rooftops in honor of first responders who were busy at work, their kids home from school, storefronts boarded up, blinking traffic lights, ambulances, but not much else, sun and moon and tree vibrations and the spring dusks of Minneapolis and Louisville and Buffalo, until George Floyd, until the protests began, the best minds of the next generation chanting, demanding sanity from the worst King America, who is clearly out of his mind.
Thank you so much, Denise. Gary, you want to read something from one of your collections?
Sure. I'll just read the first poem in Missing You Metropolis. Similar to Denise's, it's also after another writer. So this is called The Secret Art of Reading a Comic, after Auden. And before I forget, can you hear me okay? I'm using the mic through okay. I wouldn't ask, but I'm using the mic through these headphones. So, all right. The Secret Art of Reading a Comic. The old comics were never wrong. Right always defended by the hero polished like Adonis. In one moment, Thor is paused in flight towards his foe, the motion line steadying his resolve as he hurtles ever closer. The next moment, Mjolnir, his mystical hammer, slams against the Black Knight's helmet with a thwack in red letters, emulating pain, as Thor announces every move in white bubbles. These are treats, delicious 22-page snacks we swallow, never questioning the action between the panel's gutters and how similar that world bleeds into our own. Take, for example, Avengers #4, where we see the final days of World War II. Captain America and his sidekick Bucky chase a runaway plane. As they grab hold, the plane explodes. Cap yells, "No," cueing the combustion of smoke and flame. The next panel flashes forward 20 years. We see Cap preserved in a glacier found by Iron Man, Giant Man, and the others. Hail the returning hero. But what we don't see before the miraculous resurrection is Cap losing his grip on the plane, falling and helpless to watch Bucky fragment into pieces. And how below, the Allies carried on killing Nazis, failing to notice the body wrapped in the American flag, dropping into the frigid ocean behind.
Thank you so much, both you guys, for reading the work. And we were actually just doing this today in my poetry class. We were thinking about imitation, and we were thinking about we read, so we looked at a little bit of Howl, and we looked a bit at that autumn poem. And we're curious about how you approach imitation, I guess, a little bit in terms of a form or persona. And how do you avoid honoring but not plagiarizing, I guess, or how do you balance those things? Maybe Denise, since you went first, could you respond to that?
Sure. I know that I'm not even the first person to rewrite Howl. There's a great, you can find it on the Academy of American Poets website. Amy Newman did sort of a feminist version of Howl. That's, I mean, it's wonderful. And she went all the way through. I just gave up after the next generation because I was trying to talk to the next generation, but she did the whole poem. It is that sort of, I guess for this particular imitation or emulation, I was thinking maybe this is as bad as it's been in my lifetime politically, as bad as I can remember it. Ever. So I had that rage of the Ginsberg Beat generation, and I'm not really a Beat generation poet, but I went back and I was rereading it, and then I reread Amy's version as well, and I just sort of went for it. But I've done Frank O'Hara imitations, an Elizabeth Bishop imitation, and in my book also I did a couple of like World War I imitations. So I don't know, I was just trying to read broadly backwards, because sometimes as poets we get so, I'm so guilty of this. I would rather read Gary's book than Auden's, you know what I mean? I'm much more interested in what's happening right now. But I also think like without the past, we wouldn't be here. So that's sort of how my approach, I guess.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Is there ever an intimidation of like, you had this like very famous poet, very famous poem. Do you ever like doubt yourself to like, should I be doing this? Or is there an ethic at all? Or is it truly like just a kind of a celebration of the?
I think it's homage, because especially for this, I mean, I love the poem Howl. So it's not like, making fun of Howl or anything. It's like Howl, like my Howl. So, when I did the Elizabeth Bishop imitation, I was thinking of, it was her famous gas station poem. And I was thinking of like, oh, but it's dirty, she says, about a gas station. And she's mostly thinking about the people working in the gas station. But I was thinking about the actual oil, you know what I mean? So it was like Elizabeth Bishop, but for our time, being horrified by oil. And Frank O'Hara has a poem, Having a Coke with You. And so this is one of his more famous love poems. And I wrote Having a Diet Coke with You, so it's kind of just fun. I think it's, it's possible to take down another poet in a poem, which but that's not like, I think it's possible, and it could be fun if you really dislike the poem. But for me, it's more like bowing to these poets.
Absolutely. And Gary, would you like to talk a little bit about your inspiration? I loved how I teach this poem thinking about ekphrastic poetry, which is kind of honoring an art form. And you are too, right? You're honoring comic books instead of a painting. And I love the Icarus and all that. You even like steal some lines about the miraculous resurrection. And it's super clever. I was curious about how you kind of approach imitation.
Yeah, similar to what Denise was saying, like just seeing it as kind of paying homage to writers before me. And I feel like you kind of explained a good portion of the kind of inspiration, I guess, for me in taking that particular poem, Musée des Beaux-Arts, and kind of putting my spin on it, since it is an ekphrastic poem. And it's like, oh, there's these scenes that if I could use to kind of mirror the fall of Icarus if I go back to this old Avengers comic, and I'm sure somewhere out there there's some series of those poems that I probably could write. I just am lazy and I haven't. But also how that poem is kind of making a statement about this is what these artists understood that we could learn from, right? And he's talking about like painting and painters and this idea of human suffering, and so in a way I kind of wanted to like kind of take a little bit of that polish and kind of put it towards comic books in particular. So this idea that comics also can kind of inform us about human suffering and these kind of more high concept things that we typically, I'm using real broadly here, but that we typically associate with like high art, but comic books being low art, I guess, right, is how most people think of it. And so that poem kind of is kind of this, my flag in the sand, I guess, in a way too, about, we should take this more seriously, even though it's silly, on the surface. So yeah.
Yeah, well, mythology is kind of silly too, but I feel like comic books are like the modern day mythology, so Fall of Icarus, Bucky, and Captain America. I mean,
yeah.
If you talk to our students about comic books, they would not consider it low art. Just like, Very cool. So another question that we were thinking about, and both of you guys were hinting at this idea of thinking about the politics in human suffering and looking the other way, or in your case, Denise, like Hal and the political climate of today. Many of our students want to write political poetry and speak to a larger idea, but of course there's a risk of doing that without coming off as preachy or polemical or something. So I was curious about how you guys balance like political commentary or ideas into your work. Denise, do you want to maybe begin, since Hal is very specific to that?
Yeah, well, I think in a way people are always told no, no, no. I mean, I remember going to this conference not so long ago, and people like, there are no great political poems about Vietnam or blah, 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 blah. Like, it's just like kind of like, shut up, or women, like for my kind of coming of age poets were, Adrienne Rich and, Audre Lorde, and they also faced, no, like is that really art? Blah, 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 blah. Just kind of this, I don't know, you can be told no a lot. And I think now there's maybe a broadening of what poetry is. I mean, just the fact, I have a book, it's 25 years old now, called Kinky, and it's all about Barbie dolls, right? And I just remember, no, 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 what's a Barbie doll? Boo, boo. And it was all feminist critique but using Barbie as the vehicle. And in the same way that Gary is using comic books, right, as a cultural critique and a way to understand culture, I think it may be a little bit more accepted now. But yes, I think even I'm saying all that, it's true that in some ways, preaching to the converted kind of it's not that interesting. I mean, it's interesting, but I think one of the things you can do in political poems is to implicate the self, right? So like, well, I'll read it later, but I have a poem about climate change, but it's still like implicating like, uh-oh, what have I done? Or, why am I not more politically active? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do, I think just get yourself in there somewhat instead of going, wah, wah, you shouldn't, blah, blah, which you feel like doing sometimes because the world is what it is at the moment, but to try to engage and use a lot of imagery and use a lot of surprising details, that can really, you can almost say if your images are good enough, you can kind of like punch someone in the face. I mean, not literally, figuratively punch someone in the face and like wake them or slap them to wake them up,
Yeah.
I think that would be my answer.
And do you find that using like pop culture like that is not also like kind of a conduit into that world? Like,
Absolutely.
Barbie,
Yes.
bringing it up high.
Yes. And I think if even going back to, Frank O'Hara is one of my favorite poets as a New York school poet. And I mean, he was putting Pepsi and Coke and, comic books or right in his poems at a time where you wouldn't necessarily do that. You'd write in strict meter, or you kind of evoke goddesses and gods, but maybe not, like Lana Turner, or, he wrote a lot about movie stars and Billie Holiday and these, and they're political as well. I mean, slyly political. He's not in your face, but, he talks about Billie Holiday at the 5 Spot. And, I mean, so that's one way to do it too. I think through, I don't know, I said that slap and now I'm regretting it, but I would, but even a Will Smith poem, I would kind of be interested in, honestly,
Yeah,
because there's so many angles from which to draw. I mean,
absolutely. Gary, you have a similar reaction, or you want to add on to that?
Yeah. I just am like the choir probably that Denise was just talking about. Cause yeah, everything she was saying, I feel like there's something in the ether. Like in my class, like last week, we were just talking about Frank O'Hara, and we were talking about Diane Seuss's book, Frank Sonnets. And so I was showing them these O'Hara poems talking about homage, right? And just kind of how, writing these poems like O'Hare did about kind of just the moment, just walking down the street, and just taking note of like the world around them, like the current world, like that in and of itself can be like a political act. And my students, when they want to write about like war or racism or, whatever it may be, misogyny, we want to, I think kind of for the young poet, the kind of inclination is to start like huge and just say like, this is a problem, like wake up, we all have to do something. But similar to what Denise said, like there's something to kind of implicating oneself in the very things that you're trying to address. And this idea that like as a poet, you're not like up here talking about these things down here. You're like in the muck with the rest of us, which another poet said, I think, that I'm not going to remember. But yeah, so it's like, we'll talk, if you want to talk about those things, talk about like what you did today, or talk about what you're experiencing like right now. I once, and I promise I won't always use my students as examples, even though as you both know, since we teach, it's like always in my head. But right after the Mother Emanuel shooting, here in Charleston, which is only like, I don't know, like maybe 8 blocks away from the campus, I was telling the students about it in that fall. I was like, things are happening like right down the street. And it's like, what do you have to say about this? And a student wrote about how she used to jog, and she would jog by that church like every day, and how she thought nothing of it. And then she jogged by one day and just saw like, basically like, whether you want to call them tourists or just people paying their respects or whatnot, but just people crowded around that church, like taking pictures and doing all these things, and just kind of how that struck her. And it was a pretty good poem. It was just about that simple act of her running, taking a morning run.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I feel like you get to those political things by starting with the small, like kind of intimate, personal moments. I
absolutely.
don't, yeah.
You do that often in your Lay's book, or just stories, where you obviously talking about larger cultural issues, but I don't know if we can get any more personal than your origin story, and thinking about you writing about family and
Yeah.
origins. And this might be a good place for us to start the reading a little bit, so we don't run out of time
Okay.
for the Q&A. Gary, do you want to read from your work?
Sure. Yeah. I'll read, let me just read like maybe four poems, 4 or 5 poems. And before I forget, I feel like I should shout out, it's funny too, Denise, you mentioned like Kinky and Barbie, and how you just co-edited an anthology right about Barbie. So that's coming back into the spotlight, hopefully, like those poems are great. Now I feel I should have wrote a Barbie poem. Do I have any? Like, I want to read a poem about a toy. I'll read one poem from Missing You Metropolis. And it's about alcoholism, so I feel like it'll fit well with the poems and origin story. This poem's called Iron Man's Intervention, starring the Avengers. And this was written, I'd like to say, before Robert Downey Jr. ever was associated with Iron Man. As if I can't have a drink or two in the morning before risking my life for people who don't know my name. As if I can't enjoy a bottle of Chianti and a smooth woman when I'm not disarming warheads in mid-flight over the Atlantic. As if the bottle of Johnny Walker you found half empty in my briefcase implies I'm not capable of defending New York from shape-shifting green men from another world. A man at Starbucks shoved me during morning rush. I stumbled over chairs, fell. With my suit, my marvelous iron prison, I could pop his head with a flick of one finger. But without it, I'm just a man lost in the city. Meanwhile, you walk down streets with a cowl or cape, the only difference, and you're transformed. The man underneath as real as the one slamming villains into concrete. You think I need a drink to get in the suit, but you're wrong. I need it to get out. And just to kind of keep the theme of Johnny Walker, I'll read this poem from Origin Story that is kind of about my stepfather, really, but also my mom. It helps for anybody watching this now or like later. It helps if you know the colors of Johnny Walker and like what like a red bottle means versus or a red label versus a blue label, but you can look it up. Ode working twice as hard for fathers in Johnny Walker. I drank that blue a while back, but I give you some black, give you some gold. While my mother, bored, says, show me some poems. So I show her some poems, hand you the bottle. Thank you, son. You keep calling me a word that sounds foreign from any man talking to me. You talking about weather, complaining about rain, saying the sun don't like me today. My father still calls my mother. You say that nigga wants his family back. And we laugh it off, but you fast asleep beside her when my father asks, his voice full of gin and static, why doesn't he call me back? After so many years, there are two men who want to fill the same space. Drunk, you confess some nights you dream yourself on fire and wake up howling. You need Jesus, my mother says. You look at her, thinking of the baby she lost, how you cried, wanting to relieve your pain, she told you. It's better this way. Since you ain't working, I'd have to choose who to keep. You wanted to argue, but she's done it before. She's laughing now, reading lines from a poem. You want a man strong as gin. What you think that means? She knows the answer. Shit, I don't know. Now you wondering if you're failing another test. I'd chime in, but I'm busy thinking about the red I still have. Should have given you that and took that gold back. I'll just read two more poems. Let's see. I feel like I was gonna read this poem, but it's also about drinking. You know what? All these poems are kind of about drinking, which was not my intention, but here we are. I'll read The Restoration, which is a poem that's based on a place here in Charleston. We drank coffee and got ready. Listened to 93.3 during our commute to take our mind off how every day we die on TV. Every day down the block, kids in surgical masks, spray paint, Magneto was right on street signs and new storefronts, waiting to redeem spa resort passes and avocado toast dreams until they too are forced out of business. Or not. Motherfuckers can surprise you, like beating cancer or criminal charges, the 2016 election, the high cost of middle shelf liquor with a decent view. If you want to succeed, let them see you coming, our mothers once said, before asking if we wanted the switch or the belt. But an ass whooping beats sitting at the rooftop bar, looking over the steepled skyline and feeling the pang of worlds we'd rather be. With two empty seats right beside us that stay empty for the next 2 hours. surrounded by people drinking and eating, standing up, the wind threatening to blow their hats off their sunburned heads. Somewhere right now, there are two people looking for those seats. We keep hoping they'll find them, find us. Let's have another drink. Watch the muted news above a row of decent bourbon. Wait to hear, to see if they make it to us or turn up on TV. And then for this last poem, I'll read, it's called Sadache, which is a word that's defined in the poem. Yeah, that's all I should say. You keep count of the dead up the coast. Ask me how it would feel to have a sister who would be 30 by now. What can I say besides I forget my own age some days, and this loss comforts me. I turn on the radio, we detour in Fayetteville so you can visit friends you haven't seen in years. We ask the phone for directions. We stop by and you talk about your time in the Army, how my father called you the baddest bitch at Fort Hood. And is there a word? There must be a word for remembering how happy and how sad you once were, and how you'll never feel that shade again. When we pull away, I ask how it felt. And you say we all look so old. I say you all look old. I look just fine. And you laugh. You talk to the phone to get us out of here, but it can't understand. So I take it from your hands and speak each word slow. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Actually, I had a quick question about your first poem. It was in a persona poem. And I'm kind of curious about how you approach persona poem. We do this often in class, and sometimes the persona poem turns into just being like, oh, you're just writing Iron Man. Like, I know that plot, or it's like a Wikipedia entry on something or whatever. I was curious about how you approach it and make it original. You know, how do you take somebody else's voice and make it your own?
Yeah, no, thanks for that question, Mark. And I kind of like how you phrase it, because it's almost like in your phrasing of the question, like you could sit down and begin writing a poem in a voice that you're not sure who it is at first. You just know it's like not quite yours. And then as you keep writing, you're kind of like, oh, this is who I am, or this is who the speaker is. And I don't know if I have like a great answer in like how I approach those personas. I just someone else once told me it's like a game of catch with your audience. And like the idea is like, as soon as I sit down and I start writing a poem and I start thinking like, oh, this might be the voice of like Spider-Man or somebody watching Spider-Man. It becomes like a choice of like, how public of a persona do I want this to be? And if it's like a public persona like Spider-Man, I'm counting on the audience to know things about that persona. And then the expectation is that I'm going to take what you know and kind of tilt it just a little bit or angle it a certain way to maybe reveal some new aspect of that character that otherwise would kind of sound like a Wikipedia entry, right? Like I tell students all the time, like, if all you're going to do is just say things about a character that we already know, what's the point? Like, what new thing can you bring? But sometimes then that doesn't work, even despite my best intentions. So then I take a step back and it's like, okay, this persona is not working, or it falls flat, or maybe I'm guilty of just regurgitating things. So then I'm like, well, what if I write in the voice of someone who's noticing this persona, this other famous character? And what does this person have to say about being right next to this mythic figure or whoever it is? And then I get poems kind of like in the book where it's like, not that Lois Lane isn't mythic, but it's more interesting to write a poem about what Lois Lane thinks about Superman than what Superman thinks about Superman. Or the guy who watches Spider-Man web swinging in Soho, or whatever, or the guy who like attends Superman's funeral. And I take that same aspect and kind of apply it in origin story too, where I'm trying to figure out like what's the best voyeur to telling these stories about family, whether it's my mother at times, or my grandmother, or my grandfather, or a random cousin. And so, yeah, like I could say more, but I don't want to run us out of time.
No, that's fascinating. I think that's really, really interesting. You always put them in like an interesting context or point of view. And I mean, I guess that gives you distance to like bring yourself into the poem as well. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Denise, would you like to share your work with us?
Yes, thank you. That was wonderful, Gary. It was so good to hear you read. I think I'm going to switch up my order because I thought about when you were talking about persona. This is a poem that's a pantoum, and it's called I Love Sex in All Its Forms. And it's a found pantoum. And what I was this is, anyway, a long story, but I'll make it really short. I had to go into my spam file to find something that the university sent. And in it were all these ladies who thought I was a straight man, apparently, and wanted to like get together for money, of course, but still. So I started reading these, and I was kind of imagining the women, and I was sort of, anyway, so this is a persona of sorts, and everything is actually stolen from, well, whatever, but I would say taken, procured from the web, from my email. I love sex in all its forms. Spam email from Mindy. So of course, when I got this email, when I saw forms, I thought of pantoums, even though I know that's not what Mindy was talking about. So here goes. I love sex in all its forms. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and wet. Being in love, a blessing or a curse? My boner brew will make you a better screw. I just added 3 new naked photos. Being in love, a blessing or a curse? Text me, I guarantee we'll have a blast. I just added 3 new naked photos. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Text me, I guarantee we'll have a blast. What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. Want to hear me talk dirty in my luscious British accent? Need a hot date with a sexy lady? What should I do? I'm married, but only want you. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Need a hot date with a sexy lady? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. We don't have to explain ourselves to anyone. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'm gorgeous and only 2.8 miles away. Here are some other girls you might like. Are you man enough to rock my world? I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Here are some other girls you might like. Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. I'll prove to you we're the perfect match. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? Don't forget to leave space in your life for me. It's raining men and I need one. Are you available, literally or metaphorically? My boner brew will make you a better screw. It's raining men and I need one. Hey, big guy, I'm lonely and dry. So I guess I was just thinking about this idea of the political and sort of personal, I mean, not that this is personal, but like you can take these sort of, I don't know what, call girl or whatever, fangirl sites, whatever they are, and sort of make a political statement through poetry, which is kind of fun, and sort of implicating the self in a way because I was the recipient of these texts or emails or whatever. So the next poem I'll read also talks a little bit about politics, I suppose, and the idea of implicating the self. It's called Folkways. I see the sea getting closer. I read we'll soon run out of drinking water. I floss the steak out of my teeth. I should be vegan. Even the teenager told me so. She said I had the right sandals and earrings. I step off the plane, look up my carbon footprint. Greenland is melting due in part to my recent Google search. All my dead iPhones, along with scraps of bologna and turkey bones, add to the landfill populated by vultures in some countries, child scavengers in others. I buy South American fruit and North American groceries. Sustainability is a hoax, the article says, but I recycle anyway, cycle instead of drive when I can. Emma evacuates Santa Barbara wildfire in her rearview mirror, a laptop covered in ash and a few books in her trunk. I say goodbye to my furniture and clothes whenever I evacuate for yet another hurricane, decide what to bring, what to leave behind. My friend's favorite joke, what is the population of Bombay? Wait a second, let me check my watch. When I was young and naive, I had a foster child from Bangladesh. This was before I knew how much the charity's CEO was making. I was an adjunct in New York City with 3 jobs, but knew I was rich by comparison. I could pretend I was a good person. My sanitized love and concern reflected in the drawings the child sent. I started to volunteer instead at the Catholic Worker, ladling soup and oatmeal into plastic bowls. The homeless smelled like I would have smelled if I didn't have running water or a toothbrush or quarters for the laundromat. Eileen Miles slept outside their New York City apartment with the homeless, but was sure not to use any resources the displaced needed. Miles took their own food so that the truly needy could get first dibs on dumpster bagels. Until you have no toilet paper, you can't imagine how precious it is. No tampons or moisturizer or shampoo. I live in Florida now, where a graying man makes his home on the beach. He is a war vet, my neighbors say, but I am not sure which war. There have been so many. He showers where others simply rinse off sand. He waited out Irma in a shelter while I drove away with friends. Now he sleeps near the restrooms in the park and shuffles down to the surf, takes his morning swim. When he catches me leaving him half a roasted chicken, he says, thanks for the delivery. He says maybe his luck is changing. Maybe one day soon, the ocean will come to him. And this next poem is an elegy for my father who died in 2008. But it also, now that I think about it, is political in a way about class because, well, you'll hear in the poem, but I grew up very, without much money and my dad was a baker. And now I'm a professor, which I never thought would happen. My parents never would guessed it. And so it's about, I think this poem is an elegy, of course, for my dad, but also I'm trying to think about the political question and possibly also about class. Poker hands. The day you left us, you almost forgot to wave goodbye as you followed the anesthesiologist to the operating room, scuffing along in non-skid slipper socks, one of those surgical caps on your head. You were going to a sterile and cold place when Mom said, wait a minute, what about my kiss? You came back, then turned and waved goodbye with both hands, hands that could pull out pies from the oven without pot holders, hands that could shovel and make snowballs without gloves. All those years of baking, from the freezer to the proof rack to the ovens, made your hands what they were, your poker hands, which dealt the cards for pitch and 21. You were serious when you played, tapping the table so we'd pay attention. You had nicks and cuts and burns you shrugged off, just like you shrugged off the surgery. We were so sure you would come around, sore, yes, depressed, maybe. We'd read up on all the side effects of the procedure, but you were ready, fearless man of Bayer and Vicks, the only medicines you really believed in. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry I was a jerk so much of the time. I'm sorry I was such a spoiled brat. You only bought one luxury your whole life, a leather lounge chair, while I wanted a guitar, a new coat like the other girls, brand name jeans, a bike, and money for the movies. I grabbed everything with my weak hands that turn blue in a cold room, ricochet when the faucet runs too hot, hands that get chapped doing simple things like dishes. Now that you are no longer here, sometimes my hands are your hands when they are empty and still and grateful, when I fold them to pray the way you did. When I help someone like you helped me the morning after I woke up with a hangover after a high school party. You poured me a glass of orange juice and plucked a pickle from the jar and put it on the saucer. The combination worked. Our very own father and daughter dance. Soon after, we went to the airport so I could board my first plane to travel farther than you or mom had ever been. I stooped, having second thoughts, my paisley suitcase suddenly too heavy. Mom told me we could turn around, that I could stay home, and you told Mom, honey, you've got to let her go. After the agent took my ticket, I turned and waved, my pudgy fingers, my purple polish already starting to chip. Then I followed the other travelers to the rest of my life, scuffling along in my sneakers, one of your baseball caps on my head. And then I thought, since I'm getting older, I thought I would read this poem. This is the last poem in Second Story, and it's called Dear Memory. And this, I guess, would be an epistolatory poem, so a poem that is in the form of a letter to my memory. Dear Memory, what have you done with my keys? I blame you, though it's hard to hold a grudge these days, because I usually don't remember why I was angry in the first place. I look at a person, sure she's done me wrong, though the inciting incidents are lost. Former students seem familiar, but their names disperse like cigarette smoke, blowing towards a stool where I once drank myself sick. Now I'm not even sure what city that bar was in. The welcoming pink neon letters, another cloud, as though I am looking at tiny prints without my reading glasses. I was on a pink cloud when I first stopped drinking. In fact, I once looked up at the moon, weeping in gratitude. So there, I do recall something. I was walking across the Brooklyn Bridge in an ex's sweatpants, though I'm not sure anymore of his name or if I ever gave those sweatpants back. I'm usually halfway through a movie on Netflix when I realize I've already seen it, probably in an old-fashioned freestanding theater, perhaps a matinee or a midnight screening, perhaps a popcorn bucket on my lap, that is, if I wasn't on some fad diet. Did I take my pain pill or not? I'm drinking water, but not sure I can detect that bad taste all the way back on my tongue. Maybe I've been drinking more water than I thought. Is it time to go to the gynecologist again? The office usually sends me a reminder postcard, but today I'm holding a letter from the breast center saying it's time again for my mammogram. I usually get a prescription from the gynecologist about a month beforehand. This is how it's been the last few years. I wonder if my doctor is retired or dead. I would call him, but I have forgotten his name. It begins with an S, and I think I remember the exit. I look through a stack of business cards I saved for moments such as this, but no card for him. I go to take out the recycling just moments after I took out the recycling. I stand at the fridge, its door ajar, the cold light bulb, an idea for a poem which I've also forgotten. A sublime dream that woke me in the middle of the night, a sublime dream I was sure I would never forget. Ah, here is my key ring. But this gold one with the big square head, what lock could it possibly open? Thanks for listening. Thank you
so much. I had a question. I didn't even think about how often you write in form. I know you write pantoums and sestinas, but then like elegies, and then epistolaries, and really almost everything. It has some sort of formal element to your work in your latest collection, Second Story. So I was curious about how you approach form. So for instance, the pantoum that you read, the found poem with all the sex spam, and I was wondering what you're like, okay, this is going to be a pantoum. Like, how did you make that decision of form matching that content?
I really think it really was that tagline, I love sex in all its forms. And somehow I thought I couldn't be getting an email like this, forms, pantoum. And then I just like laughed at myself. But then I looked down and there were so many of them. So of course, I didn't click on any links, but I opened them all and just started cutting and pasting, thinking like, I'll do something with these later. And then I thought, why not a Pantoum? Because I almost said they were so good in a way. Like one of them really was, do you have time for me literally or metaphorically? And I thought, all right, girl, that's not bad, you know? And it was just so weird that I just kept them and I thought I would respond to them or something. And then I just let them stand on their own. But the form kind of got me to be playing around with, with them. So there's another Pantoum in the book about my mother losing her memory. And like, so it's like, if you've ever had like a parent or grandparent or great grandparent that's starting to lose their memory, they repeat a lot. And so that was also like a natural. So sometimes the form sort of has to, for me anyway, has to have, I mean, I don't like sit down ahead of time and like form equals content and make a list or anything, but there's something going on that makes me think it should be a form.
Yeah, you have one about, you have a Pantoum about the pandemic too, which makes sense. Like,
oh, that's right. I forgot about that. The pandemic Pantoum, because every day was like, I was like, I've lost all track of time. And yeah, so it seemed like the right form for that as well. Yeah, you're right. I forget about that. So there's 3 Pantoums in the book.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, like, I love how the form matches the content in so many of these. I was also thinking about your work, Denise, then we'll kind of also ask some bigger questions about process, but I was curious about how you write pretty big poems, they're long, they're like long lines, lots of language. And so I was kind of curious about, I guess this is a process question, like how do you approach revision and how do you turn it in different directions so it has like a certain structure to it? Do you want to speak a little bit about the bigger picture like that?
Absolutely. Like if you think they're long in the book, you should see the first drafts. I just kind of throw everything in. I don't know why. For me, and some of your students may relate to this too, that it's easier to write a lot and then cull back once I get going, right? Than to just go, nice image, boop, take a break, nice image. Boop. Like I'll just lose tracks. I kind of have to finish, maybe not all in one draft, but like there's a big terza rima, which is another form in the book that I had to finish a day at a time or I wouldn't go on. You know what I mean? Like I kind of had to do the rough draft of a full day. It's broken down into days. And yeah, so just try to get everything there and then pull back is usually my thinking. And forms really help with that. If I don't know if any of your students are long-winded as I am, but forms, you kind of have to count syllables, you kind of have to cut stuff. It helps you to revise. But in general, I usually, my process is just, I almost know I'm gonna take up the last 3 or 4 lines. I almost know it because I always overwrite. And I almost always like don't have a first good line. It always takes me like 3 lines to get to the first line. So I just do it because it's easier than sitting there waiting for a really good line. I just kind of keep going till something happens. Right. And if nothing happens, that's okay too. You can throw a poem away, no biggie. You just start another one,
Right. Gary, you want to talk a little bit about your process? Like how do you approach a poem? How do you know if something is a poem? Maybe some revision techniques that you have?
Yeah, like I love Denise's answer to that about just like kind of throwing as much as you can at the page. I do a similar thing. I don't know, I don't think of my poems as being long necessarily. But yeah, like I tend to, so I will say like I really love revision. Like, and I don't know if that makes me strange or not, but I have more fun revising most of my poems than I do drafting them or generating them. And I think part of that is that I'm not sure what the hell I'm doing. That's probably why I'm a poet, because I'm just like trying to write something down. And like Denise was saying, just like if it doesn't work, then I'm fine just like throwing it away. I don't do that immediately, but like it might be like just a block of prose. It might be, it might even be like a flash fiction story or something, but I'm just trying to get something down. And then I go through this kind of process as I go back and I kind of start chiseling away at things that are like superfluous. It's like, okay, I've already said that in some other way here. or I'll have like a ton of images or distinct actions or details, and then when I go back I realize that they're all kind of doing a similar thing. So it's like, wait, I just wasn't confident, so now I got to figure out which one does the best job of rendering this thing that I'm trying to render. But inevitably I feel like what happens is that as I'm chiseling away at kind of what is really kind of underneath the surface of that initial draft, I realize I stumble upon what I'm really trying to say in that poem. And then I have to sit down and basically do kind of like a second full draft, basically, and then continue the poem from that initial draft to kind of approach what I'm really trying to get at, whatever that is. And then like eventually I feel like I get to a place then where it's like, okay, this feels finished. And then it goes through, like, I couldn't tell you how many drafts where my main guiding principle for like finishing a poem is like, is this ready to be submitted? And I constantly tell myself no until one day I'm like, okay, I think this is ready. Like just that simple act of like sending it out causes me to revise a poem like countless times. But I am also very slow. So I can work on a poem for like 6 years sometimes, but you know, that's not every day. I just have that poem and I just don't feel like it's quite ready, and I do other things and then come back to it every once in a while. And then some poems come out immediately. So, you know.
Absolutely. We have a question from an audience member. Tim was asking, we were talking about politics earlier. He says, do you think all poets, writers, artists in general have a duty of some sort to be conscious of society and write kind of those morality poems, justice issues poems? Or is it okay to be a poet who doesn't want to write about those things? Like, is it maybe another way to think about it is like, is all poetry somewhat political? Kind of like what you're saying, Denise, like, oh, I guess this is kind of political. Like you didn't even notice it. Or I guess, I don't know, how do you guys approach that idea in terms of obligation as a poet? Denise, what do you think?
This is such a great question, and it comes up, I mean, it comes up in my brain all the time, because sometimes I'll read poets and I'm like, I mean, and they're really good, technically amazing, but it's about like a vase of flowers and breakfast, and you know, it's like, oh, go. But that's just my taste. I don't think I feel drawn to being somewhat political, or at least I would say observant of our times, because I think it was Toni Morrison who said, you know, it's like 100 years from now, should the planet survive, someone picks up, you know, a book and they're like, wait, 2020, wait, wasn't there like a war? Wasn't there like, you know, whatever, wasn't there a terrible person in the White House? Wasn't, you know, like, did this person not even notice and they're riding a horse or whatever it is, you know what I mean? They're going horseback riding. So I think just maybe putting something, you know, not everyone obviously has the same politics, but something that marks the time, even maybe if you don't want to write about politics, or let's say you're a really lyric poet, you know, someone like, I don't know, Lucille Glick or something, right? You even just like a simple date at the bottom of poems puts you in history, or puts you in a certain time and place. And I think even that, I mean, yes. So basically I'm saying like, yeah, you're not obligated to write it. I personally wish you would, poet, but there's no obligation, of course. I mean, you have to write what you want to write and what you need to say.
Yeah, it's almost like, can you avoid it, right? It's like if you write about a poem and a cell phone comes up, it's like, well, time and place.
Right. Yes, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, right. Putting something of the now in there.
You don't even notice it. What do you think, Gary? Do you think there's an obligation, or do you think you can just write about a boss?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can write about whatever you want. Like, I don't think you have an obligation, Timothy, towards any particular like social justice issue. I'm kind of like Denise in the same sense of like, though, if I read a poem that's just about like puppy dogs and rainbows, even if it's well crafted, I'm kind of like, well, I feel like there should be something at stake there. Like there's something worth learning. And I don't mean learning as in like a moral lesson, but just, you know, like in writing the poem, you're in a slightly different place after writing it than you were before writing it. And whatever that place is, I don't know. It could be just a millimeter. But I was just looking at his question again on my screen. But, I think the part where it says, do poets write about those things because they have big hearts and that's what's on their minds? I think that rings true. And I think the fact that you're alive and you're writing about it, whatever it is, that in and of itself is probably a political act, right? So no matter what, morality or social justice issues be damned, if you're alive and can write, that is a political act in and of itself. And so don't worry about being political or not. Like, you are by default, by just the fact that you're writing about the world that you live in right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I love that. The personal can be political. Which
Yeah, that's Adrienne Rich, right? She says the personal is political. Because
yeah.
I'm like, now that I'm rethinking what I said earlier about the vase of flowers, that in a way is a political act. Like, that's telling me that person's of a certain class, doesn't have money worries because they're looking at their flowers, doesn't have any worry at all, basically.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. And even though it's not my cup of tea, it's, to some people, it does make sense or is important.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, maybe we have time for one more question. It's kind of a big one, but and it's almost an impossible question, but we often end many of the readings with this idea of influence. So who would you say, and obviously it's probably gonna be more than one, who influences your voice? Who was a big, kind of contributing factor to how you write? Gary, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So I just had like an email questionnaire that asked a similar question. So I'll just repeat what I said there, which was, which is true. I'm not just doing it because I'm lazy, but like, I studied Lucille Clifton, and the poet AI. And those poets, especially during my formative years between undergraduate and graduate student, really, really informed a lot of how I think about writing poetry. And also, I'll throw a quick shout out to Linda Hull too, who I love. I love her as a poet. And I'll just say quickly that it was just her willingness to engage in persona, which I feel like is no small leap if you look at her work and my work. Like, I really took to persona thanks to her, and how willing she was to kind of embody kind of cruel and like not necessarily good people, but find a way to humanize them in ways that didn't evoke condemnation or necessarily sympathy, if that makes sense. Like, I'm really touched by how she's able to do that. And with Clifton and Hull, and especially Clifton, just how strong her voice is and how she is a poet who doesn't write big poems. Her language is deceptively simple, yet she just says so much in her work. So
absolutely. Yeah. I love those poets. Denise, would you like to?
Yes, Gary, I never knew that about you, but I was really influenced by AI as well. AI, the poet. I mean, she's so incredible. And now that you say it, I'm like, of course you were. I mean, that makes complete sense. But for students, quite a few of her poems are online, but she's like, for me, she wrote about social issues all the time, but also like she has, well, not, I won't say but also, and also through celebrity culture, not unlike Frank O'Hara. So she had a poem in the voice of Marilyn Monroe, O.J. Simpson, the Chappaquiddick murder. I mean, it just like, she would just go there. She had a poem, but then on a more kind of non-celebrity persona, like I think about this poem often. It's called Child Beater. And it's actually in the persona of someone abusing a child. And you wouldn't think, no other poet I know of has gone there. Maybe, the serial killer, but even that's like, I don't know, but like on TV-ish, but this is so dark and so scary. And she just loved humanity. I mean, you could tell, or like had this big, empathetic brain that could just kind of go into anyone's kind of thinking, which I think is great. Another big, Frank O'Hara, who I mentioned, all the pop culture stuff. Sharon Olds, who I think women of my generation in general, it's just like we bow down to Sharon Olds because she was so important. And then like the older poets, Dylan Thomas was one of the first poets that I read, and I did not understand a word, really. I mean, a few of them, like Fern Hill, I got, but others, I was like, what is going on? But he wrote in form, right? He wrote like, what is it? Rage Against the Dying Light, you know, that famous poem. Yeah, it's so good. And so I think I was really drawn to him. Sylvia Plath, Anne Sexton, you know, the like women writing about like being women, because that was really important coming up. Just to, like, give permission, I think, to do that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Very
Awesome.
cool. Well, now after our conversation, I thought of like 20 more questions I wanted to ask, but we run out of time. So, but I just want to appreciate you guys for like taking an afternoon to chat with us and share your work. And it's been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us. It was a pleasure. It was really fun.
Yeah, this was great. Yeah, thank you, Mark. And thank you to Denise for, to get to catch up with you. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe someday we can do it face to face.
Looking forward to it. Yeah, anytime. Anytime.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. See y'all.
Yeah. Bye.